Hi guys, today I will be reviewing Total War Warhammer 2. Right, so anyone who hasn't watched any of my previous reviews on any of the Total War games, I own pretty much all of them. I've loved pretty much all of them. You know, they're really great, and I love the fact now that we're in a situation where we have Warhammer combined with Total War. It's a great combination. All that said, if you have watched any of my videos before, you'll also know that certainly in terms of the Warhammer franchise, I have had a few gripes about costs and DLCs, and I'll go back into that a little bit later in the review. Now, to anybody who hasn't played Total War before, just as a quick sum up, basically what Total War is a campaign strategy side of a game and then a real-time battle strategy side. The campaign strategy side is where you have your units or your army and you move them around the campaign map to various locations to engage other factions and go into wars or take over castles and such things like that. That then takes you into the battle side, which is where you control your army in a real-time battle sense, and you then combat against other armies. So yeah, that's basically what Total War is. Obviously, in this particular case, as with its predecessor, this is the Warhammer universe, which is very cool. I played, when I was younger, quite a bit of Warhammer 40k. Didn't really actually do too much Warhammer itself, but it was something I enjoyed, and obviously combining that with Total War are two of my loves. So that is a great combination. And as with its predecessor, it works very well. Within this particular game, you've got 4 factions, which does seem a bit limited. Obviously, we had a similar situation with the previous one, but I would have liked a bit more in there. I've got to be honest. When I went to the battle bit and saw there was only 4 factions, that was a bit disappointing. But there are 4 factions. You've got Skaven, you've got the Lizard Men, you have the Dark Elves, and you have the High Elves. And it's great to have some elves there because that was something that was definitely lacking from the previous one. So yeah, it is cool to be playing as elves, and also the other factions too. And with these 4 factions, they each have their own separate starting locations on the map, and they're quite far away from each other actually. The map is pretty sizable. I think it might be bigger than the previous map from Warhammer. It's probably debatable. There's quite a lot of sea in it, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But the general look of it and the feel of it, again, like its predecessor, looks really good. And like I say, the 4 factions have their own sort of separate bits. They actually have their own sort of separate islands almost to an extent. On the left-hand side of the map, I believe it's a little bit different. I think they do connect, and where the lizard guys start actually sort of in the middle of that sort of left-hand continent. But certainly the High Elves and the Skaven are on separate islands or separate continents, if you want to look at it as that. So yeah, it's sizable. I like that. Right, so just going into a bit more of what you're doing in the campaigns and stuff. Again, as with the previous Warhammer, it's very similar. You have the tech trees. They're all unique to each faction, a bit different obviously to the way they work, to the look for each one and everything. The diplomacy seems to be more or less exactly the same. More or less everything seems to be the same. Each faction has its own sort of unique things that it sort of requires, or its sort of main purpose for you to progress. As with Warhammer, that was certainly the extent, much more with some of the DLC factions. And again, you see that with this. There are a few little tweaks here and there, some improvements, but nothing major. I mean, in terms of some of the little improvements, I kind of like this. It's not a major issue, but when you're pressing to go on to the next turn, instead of getting that sort of menu screen that sometimes comes up telling you all the different actions you have to do, it just takes you straight there. So if you need to do some research, you know, because you've already researched your last project that's completed, it'll just take you straight to that menu before you actually complete the turn. The same with upgrading your characters and stuff like that. It just makes it a little bit easier. It's nothing major, but to be honest, I appreciated that. Also, on that note, when you're ending the turn and you're going, it scrolls through all the various different factions and what they're doing at the top, which sometimes can drag on a little bit. So, you know, back in the Rome 2 days, that could go on for a while. And it did also suffer a bit with Warhammer. That has sped up, and on top of that, it does give you an option to fast forward it as well as pause it. And it's developed a bit more than that. There's a little actual menu screen that comes up at the top left that gives you a few more things you can look into with that. That's an improvement. That's good. It makes it feel a little bit more like it's worthwhile, as opposed to just having to sit there and wait for your next turn. I mean, it is still in essence that, but it is an improvement. And I would say from what I've played so far, although I haven't got too far into any of my campaigns yet, so maybe it might slow down a bit more when there's more of the map's been uncovered and stuff. But on the whole, that seems to have sped up, which is a nice touch, because I do know that did or was something that did sort of grind people a little bit, how long sometimes you're waiting for all the different factions to go through. It's cool that there are lots of different sort of factions on the map and stuff, that's great, but obviously the more there are, the longer it goes through that bit. On a slightly different side of the campaign, but this is a bit of a gripe, I think. When you choose your factions, choose which faction you want to be, and then select that and start the campaign, you go into the sort of the intro movie or whatever, so the same as any other Total War game. And in the previous one, some of those cinematics and stuff were quite good, and it sort of created more of a scene and was enjoyable. With these ones, they seem to have maybe cut a few corners, because a lot of it is just still shots. And that's not so bad when you like looking at the map and stuff and sort of seeing scenes of a castle or an army or something like that. But when there's actually characters conversing with one another, at times it felt bad, to be honest. And I'm not quite sure why they've done that. I don't know if it's a sort of, if I'm being really kind, that it's something referencing to all the sort of the books and the various literature that came with Warhammer and still does. And so it's sort of playing on that, although they didn't do that in the original Warhammer. But it feels more like they were just cutting a few corners to save some time, probably because they want to start working on the DLCs as opposed to the actual game. That could just be me, but I didn't like that, to be honest. Right, getting into the factions a bit deeper. I've started a campaign with each one of them. I haven't played too far into any of the particular ones. I've done a fair bit with the High Elves and a little bit with the Dark Elves, but the other two I haven't done too much with. But I've done a fair few battles in the battle side of the game without doing it through campaign. And the unit rosters aren't too bad for a vanilla version. You know, hopefully we'll have Steam Workshop or various mods that we can put on as time goes by to sort of expand these armies a little bit. But on the whole, they're pretty well rounded. There's a reasonable troop selection. You've obviously got some new sort of monsters and stuff in there. Certainly from the Lizardmen side, there's some sort of more unique looking monsters and stuff. With the High Elves, you've got sort of various dragons and eagles, which obviously very similar to previous Warhammer, but still cool. Dark Elves have got some sort of crazy stuff in places. I see a 5-headed dragon, that's quite cool. And Skaven's got some big stuff and some weird looking things, to be fair. Now, just talking about looking, the one faction that at times just looks a bit out of place on some of the maps is the Lizardmen. It looks, there's just been a few times when I'm watching them and just it feels a little bit like it's a mod that someone's put in, and it would, you know, quite good, but doesn't look like it quite fits into the game. But they've done a good job making it, and it goes in there. They just don't quite look right within the environment. Some of them are just a bit sort of too colourful, maybe. I'm being quite picky here, but just in terms of that sort of immersive aspect, just losing that a little bit with the Lizardmen at times. I don't know, that's possibly just me, but on the whole, the units and the armies and stuff all look really cool. Imagine the sort of premium rate, the premium level that everything is in Warhammer, and the way it all looks is completely transformed into this. And actually, to be honest, it's probably a little bit better. I have noticed that the sort of the particle graphics, when when you're moving the camera around, and so a character would sort of go out of shot, it's changed. It sort of more generates in sort of little bits rather than just cuts out. That probably sounds like a complete load of nonsense, but if you play the game, you'll see what I mean. I don't know quite exactly what sort of impact that really has, but obviously this isn't exactly a copy and paste of Warhammer. There has been a bit of time spent changing some stuff and making the mechanics work a little bit differently. And on that, within the battle side of things, I have noticed, I think the AI seem to be doing they're a bit more intelligent. When I've done the battles, I think about it on normal or hard. And some of the manoeuvres they've done, it's nothing amazing, but in the past, they pretty much were like asleep. They never really did anything particularly that tactical a lot of the time. With this, I've noticed maybe the AI battle is actually improved a little bit, because I do know that's a gripe a lot of people have had in the past. I still wouldn't say it's as good as it could be, but that does look like that might have been tweaked a little bit as well. So that's definitely an improvement. Right, now onto my moany bit, unfortunately. Now, like I say, if you've watched any of my previous reviews about Total War, especially in terms of Warhammer, then you'll know that I do have a bit of an issue about the whole strategy that's towards it in terms of the pricing and what feels like significant parts of the games being taken out so they can sell them at a later date. I have sort of two issues at the moment with that. One is the fact that I've got to wait for the game. You know, in terms of Warhammer basically was the completed article about, I think, 2 months ago when the Norska DLC came out. 2 months ago. But then the other one's come out now, so I'm playing this, but I almost feel like going back to Warhammer because at least that's completed. But I've spent a load of money on that, and I don't really want to have to wait and spend money to get this game to the level it should be at. For example, there's no blood in it from what I can see, so I assume I'm going to have to go and pay again, if I choose to, for blood again. And now, I know it's a second game, it's a separate game, but I thought these were supposed to be slightly interlinked. I haven't seen any of that, to be honest. I was a bit disappointed. I did think, maybe stupidly, that the factions that I had from Warhammer 1 would be available to play in Warhammer 2. Not necessarily on the campaign map, I accept that, but in the battles. Again, that might well be a DLC that gets released. I'm not too sure, but this is my concern. There's various parts of the game that do feel like they're missing a little bit, and you know that they're going to come in the form of DLCs, which is a bit annoying. And also, if they're going to charge like they did last time for the Beastmen and stuff, that's too much. $7.99 or whatever, you know, I could possibly swallow that, but when you get into the £14.99 or the equivalent in dollars or whatever currency you'll be using, it just doesn't quite sit right. And this is the thing, this is the fundamental thing with this game. I love it, but I also sort of resent it, and that's such a shame. And I've said it before, but it's such a shame that I'm being made to feel like that, because I love this franchise and I am spending the money to do it, but I resent them for making me spend so much and for irking it out so long as well. So I've got to wait like 2 years after the game is launched for it to be finished with all the DLCs available to play the game the way it should have been. And I can see the same things happening here as well. Disappointing. As a sum up on that, as you can tell, I do have an issue about the whole pricing. The game is a premium game, okay, and it all runs really well. It feels a bit limited that it's only got 4 factions. I know there will be more, but I'm going to have to pay for that. So it's sort of bittersweet there. You know, someone's making a game that I really wanted to be made, and I love it. But at the same time, I've spent quite a bit of money already, and I want to sort of be able to fight the Empire against Skaven, things like that. You know, I've spent over £100 to this point. Surely I should have that option. Maybe, you know, maybe I'm asking too much. I don't know. Right. So in conclusion, as you can tell, the game is very, very good. It is very, very good. Just like its predecessor, it works really, really well, plays really, really well, looks great, offers the whole Warhammer experience in the Total War format. That is brilliant. But it does feel like large chunks of the game are missing, and that's a very similar experience to how I felt a few years ago when playing Warhammer, and that proved to be the case. And once that game was finally sort of fully finished, it felt full, it felt like it had a lot going on. But that was only a couple of months ago. And now we've got Warhammer 2, where again it feels like it's missing a lot. Am I going to have to wait 2 years for that? So that does have an impact on my final score for this. I've seen some of the sort of the more magazines and higher premium companies, IGN and stuff, have given this I think like 9 or 9.5, but they don't probably have to buy the game. Us, the consumers, do. We're the ones who have to spend all our money, well, not all our money, but have to spend a lot of money on these games to finally get it to be a completed thing. And that, once again, does have an impact on my score. This game, in essence, is a 9 out of 10. But because there's bits taken out, and also because maybe there's been a few corners cut with some of the cutscenes and stuff, that might just be me, but that does feel a little bit cheap. Our final verdict will be an 8 out of 10.